child of a barren woman. Maharaj is extremely alert to ensure that, in response to his invitation to ask questions, the visitors do not start a discussion amongst themselves and thus get entangled into an intricate web of their respective concepts, to the exclusion of the subject which he had been expounding. When there are signs of this happening, he is so very amused that he is wont to remark, "Ah, now you are discussing details of the wedding ceremony of the child of a barren woman." Maharaj uses this simile of the child of a barren woman fairly frequently. One morning, a visitor, who had perhaps heard it for the first time, was quite intrigued and requested him to illustrate it by an example. For a while, Maharaj remained silent with his eyes closed, without the least movement, his breathing as shallow as could be, and we thought he would go into a samadhi. But then he started talking in a low voice. "Look, understand what time is. Unless you know the nature of time, you will not understand the nature of phenomena. What happens is that one takes time for granted and then proceeds to build all kinds of concepts. If you are going to build, should you not first see what your foundation is like? Time and space go together. Why are you able to cognize things? Because you see them. Would you have been able to see things if they had no form? You see things because they have form, volume, because they are extended into space. Let us go a step further. If things were seen in space for a split second only, would you be able to perceive them? You perceive things only because they are extended into space for a certain duration, and the forms remain long enough before you to enable you to perceive them. If there were no concepts of time and space themselves are obviously not objects, things would not be perceptible, and things would not be things. If there were no space-time, no past, present, and future, how could there have been any phenomena, any events? Please try to understand that both phenomena and time are merely concepts and have no existence of their own. Whatever things are seen or thought of are merely images conceived in consciousness, the supposed actuality of which is as real as a dream or a mirage. Now, do you understand what I mean when I say that all phenomenality is the child of a barren woman? This point about space-time, said Maharaj, is so difficult to grasp that even highly intelligent people are baffled and confounded at its complexity and are unable to comprehend its true significance. At this stage, he addressed a question to the visitors generally. Have the scientists ever gone deeply into the problem of the nature of space-time? There were various comments, but the consensus was that no scientists had really made a deep study of this problem, but that some of the topmost among them, including Einstein, had come to the conclusion that the entire universe is of the nature of thought, and they held that the nature of space-time is really incomprehensible since it crosses the borders of the mind and all human knowledge acquired so far. Maharaj laughed and said, "How can the scientists do it with their puny minds? They may conceive unlimited space and unlimited time, but can they conceive the very absence of space and time? It is impossible because that which conceives, in its conception, cannot conceive the conceiving. Would it be possible for the eye to see its own seeing? Can the fire burn itself? Can water understand thirst? If you can grasp the significance of what I have said, you will cease looking at things against the fixed background of time. You will cease searching for truth through the medium of your proud intellect. Indeed, you will realize that the very effort of searching is an obstruction, because the instrument with which you will be searching is a divided mind, a conceptual subject seeking a conceptual object. When you realize this, you will stop searching and let the impersonal consciousness take over. And then, when the impersonal consciousness lets you in on the mystery of its own source, you will know that there is no I or me, but only the essential subjectivity. That things have no substance, and, therefore, a phenomenon is the child of a barren woman. Finally, that I am in temporality, infinity. Let us understand basic facts. Almost all the visitors from abroad come to Maharaj after having read his book, I Am That. They say that on reading it, they felt a compulsive desire to meet Maharaj personally. Quite a few of them also say that they had been interested in the spiritual quest for many years. Let us take the case of an average foreign visitor. His first visit almost invariably raises a certain amount of doubt in his mind. Whether he has done the right thing in spending so much money, and his hard-earned annual leave in coming here. The dirty surroundings of Maharaj's house, the simplicity of his tiny loft room, his unimpressive physical appearance, and his plain attire, all these contribute to the initial doubt. Of course, after attending a couple of sessions, and certainly by the time he leaves, the foreign visitor is already looking forward to his next visit. There is also one other factor which initially keeps pricking the foreign visitor's mind. Maharaj's behavior is not unlike that of any other common man on the street, and it goes against his concept of how a sage should behave, though this concept itself may be exceedingly vague. He finds the walls of Maharaj's small room cluttered with pictures of numerous gods and saints. He sees him participating in the chanting of bhajans 4 times a day. He finds him smoking cheap country-made cigarettes all the time, and sometimes talking on trivial matters in a light-hearted manner. He finds all this very confusing. His preconceived notion about Maharaj was perhaps that of a saffron-robed patriarchal figure, conversing gravely from an elevated seat some distance away from the visitors, occasionally bringing about a miracle or two in a condescending manner. Instead, he finds an utterly ordinary man. It is, therefore, not surprising that before the end of the very first session, our visitor cannot resist the temptation of asking why Maharaj, in spite of being a sage, sings bhajans 4 times a day. Or perhaps the question could be, why does Maharaj find it necessary to smoke? Maharaj's usual answer in such cases is simple. Why not? I have been associated with this body for 80-odd years. Why should it not receive the few crumbs which it has got used to? As for bhajans 4 times a day, it is a practice from the times of my youth. If since then I have had what is usually called awakening, should I feel compelled to give up this old and harmless routine? One must go through one's allotted span of time. Does it matter what one does, so long as one does not knowingly hurt anyone else? It is as simple as that. Maharaj continues with this theme somewhat as under. If one sees, apperceives, things as they are, if one comprehends the total manifestation with the whole mind and not with the dichotomized mind of an individual, one is not far away from the Great Awakening, and then whatever one does is of no importance. Indeed, to think that an individual being can act independently is itself a mistake. What we are is the conscious presence, and not the outside casing of consciousness, not the body which is only a psychosomatic apparatus used for cognizing the manifestation. This apparatus is only a spatiotemporal concept, and as such has no independent existence and, therefore, cannot act independently, despite all appearances to the contrary. Let us understand this basic fact. What then is life? Life in this universe is nothing other than the functioning of manifestation, despite what each individual might think. Viewed in this perspective, the various destructive manifestations like floods and earthquakes lose their sting. Each body is nothing but food for someone else, a mouse for a cat, man or beast for a lion, lamb or chicken for man, and so on. So what is good for one is evil for another. Indeed, whatever may seem to happen constitutes nothing but the functioning of manifestation. To each individual, it all appears to be his own doing and experiencing. But the fundamental fact is that no phenomenal object, and that is all that a sentient being relatively is, can have any independent existence of its own. Once this is comprehended, it will automatically follow that all responsibility and guilt are also imaginary concepts, based upon the mistaken notion that a sentient being has independent existence, autonomy, and choice of action. Then, what about all the eminent exemplars in the various spheres of human activity? The arts, sciences, athletics, the greatest thinkers. We must admire the work done by consciousness through these various physical forms, but not the individual persons who are nothing more than conceptual phenomena. Let us understand and be clear about what really happens. The question that would follow is, if the individual persons do not achieve whatever has been achieved, who does? The answer, no one individually. The functioning of the manifestation takes place in consciousness through prajna, that brilliant actor-producer of this total dream show, which assumes all the roles in the great dream drama that this manifestation is. And the source of this conscious presence is the noumenon. Sentient beings appear to act and react, but the real functioning happens in consciousness. Let us, says Maharaj, admire the azure sky, the lovely moon, and the twinkling stars. Let us write poems about the beauty of nature. Let us love the many avatars that have descended upon the earth through the ages. Let us sing bhajans 4 times a day. But let us at least understand the true position. I, noumenon, am all the functioning in consciousness. Finally, we may ask ourselves, what then are we doing all day? Are we not living our lives? We, the millions of people in the world? If we could think deeply and rationally about what we know as life, we would easily come to the conclusion that all that we do throughout the day and day after day is nothing but objectifying. Indeed, manifestation is itself nothing but continuous objectivization, because when in deep sleep consciousness rests, objectivization necessarily ceases. So does the objectified universe. In deep sleep, there is no self, no world, no God. What we think as doing is nothing but objectivization. Functioning of manifestation takes place so long as there is consciousness. By unnecessarily identifying oneself as the doer, one attracts responsibility and guilt. When the mind, which is the content of consciousness, is blank, when it fasts or rests, the spinning and weaving of the mind ceases, and it calms down. When the mind stops doing, it merely is. In the absence of objectivization, our absolute presence is. The manifested universe is not. We are. Or, rather, I am. Let us at least understand basic facts, self-knowledge, and problems of life. One morning, the session was enlivened by the visit of a well-known social and political figure, a retired Indian diplomat, whose presence generally made for a good-humored and lively discussion. This morning, the subject was whether self-knowledge and the practical life in the world could go together. Were they complementary, or were they contrary to each other? This visitor is not only not unfamiliar with Maharaj's teaching, but has imbibed it sincerely, though it would seem that once in a while his basic proclivities towards social and political catharsis would give him a feeling of spiritual instability, underlining the need for a quick refresher course. Apart from this, he loves Maharaj greatly and does not mind driving the distance of about 100 miles to Bombay only to see him. His basic question was, can a man honestly afford to spend his time absorbed in meditation on the self, to the exclusion of the many social and political problems in the country and the world. The most refreshing part of Maharaj's talks is his unique approach to problems referred to him. He says that we should forget the conceptual jungle that grows quickly around any theme, as well as the weight of the traditional scriptures, and should get down to the fundamentals. Maharaj tackled the question of this distinguished visitor with his customary elan. "Let us deal with the matter," he said. "You and I, now." There have been numerous great personalities and avatars in the world during the past 2,000 to 3,000 years. Each one of them had laid down his own list of do's and don'ts, depending on his own concept of right and wrong, and the needs of the times as he saw them. So far, so good. Let us now also ask ourselves, what have all these great men achieved? Have they been able to make the slightest change in the behavior of man or nature? There must be some reason, some fundamental reason, why they had not been successful. Could it be that the problem itself had been misconceived or misperceived? Could it be that attacking the problem directly was like attacking the heads of a hydra, which, when cut off, are replaced instantly by others? And that the only way to decimate the hydra was to locate its heart and strike there? "Now," said Maharaj, "what are the basic ingredients of any social, political, economic, or any other problem? When we reduce the problem to its basic essentials, what do we find? The essentials are I, you, representing the millions of people, and the physical world. On analyzing these basic essentials, what do we find? All me's and you's and the earth, the sky, the moon, and the stars, are they not mere conceptual images in consciousness? All existence is objective. All me's and you's exist as one another's objects in the consciousness that cognizes them. And so far as the world, or universe, is concerned, is it in essence any different from the world which you create in your dream, or, more accurately, the world that gets created in your dream consciousness, and which is made of the same ingredients and inhabited by the same kind of people, including yourself, as in what you call the real world? Your real world, you might say, had been existing long before you were born. Well, in your dream world also, there are seas and mountains and buildings and people which have obviously been existing for a long, long time. Are you going to solve the many social and political problems of the people in your personal dream? Is it not therefore true, continued Maharaj, that the heart of the hydra, the root of the problem, is consciousness in which the entire manifested universe appears? Indeed, is not consciousness the hydra itself? And is it not consciousness on which the entire attention should be directed? Its nature, the cause of its appearance, and other relevant factors. Since it is consciousness in which the entire phenomenal world appears, it necessarily follows that all manifestation will become sensorially perceptible only if it is extended spatially and for a certain duration of time. One must, therefore, necessarily accept the purely conceptual existence of the psychic apparatus of space-time as a prerequisite for the perception of the manifested universe. This leads us to the following conclusions. Without the concept of space-time, the manifested universe would not be sensorially perceptible, and therefore, all events based on cause and effect, and extended in space-time, must also be only conceptual. If the manifested universe is only an appearance, in the absence of consciousness, the universe cannot exist on its own. Then the manifested universe is the reflection of something that is present in its own right. Phenomena, then, are the objective aspect of the noumenon, the total potentiality, the totality of the known in the infinity of the unknown. Consciousness cannot be used to transcend consciousness, and therefore, Noumenon represents the outside parameter of cognition. Noumenon, that which is, can only be, and it can be only now. In the absence of the conceptual space-time, there can be absolutely no where or when for any thing to be. Now that we see that the world, problems wherein are to be solved, is only an appearance, let us get back to the me's and you's, who are supposed to solve the world's problems. Before we start to identify the world's problems and proceed to solve them, should we not identify ourselves? We are, relatively, sentient beings, and we want to do something to solve the problems in the world. Is it possible for a sentient being, who is itself conceptual, to do anything that is other than conceptual? What do we do from morning through night, except during deep sleep, other than continuously objectivizing? And is the human body, which is actually nothing but a psychosomatic apparatus, capable of doing anything other than producing illusory images and interpretations? Whatever we may think of ourselves, and this image keeps on changing from time to time and there is nothing stable about it, we cannot but be an integral part of the total manifestation and the total functioning, and cannot in any manner be apart from it. We are better able to comprehend this in the case of a personal dream, which we can review after waking up. What appears as oneself in the dream, with an independent identity, is clearly seen, on a review after waking, to be totally devoid of any independent substance, a mere puppet being manipulated. Is it really any different in the world that we think of as real? Ponder over this. Could it not be that we dream that we are awake, we dream that we are asleep, and all the time life is being lived, all a product of the dreaming mind, objectivization going on in consciousness? And what is consciousness itself, but only a concept which comes like an eclipse on the noumenon for a certain length of time? If this position is perceived directly, intuitively, then we know that in relativity, we are the conscious presence, the animating consciousness, and not the phenomenal object to which it gives sentience. When we see the false as false, the problem resolves itself. We are the content of this living dream, actors in this living drama. And actors can only play their roles. Nothing more. The distinguished visitor heard Maharaj in baffled silence. He had no words to express what he thought or felt. Guru's grace is all I need. To the usual query, Maharaj, the visitor from Calcutta, gave the relevant information about himself. He said he had been interested in self-knowledge for the past many years. He had met almost every well-known saint in northern India, and many others not so well-known. Maharaj smiled when this was translated to him. He added that he had studied all the principal Upanishads, various commentaries in English and Bengali by different scholars. He was quite well versed in the Sanskrit language also, and had studied most of the traditional scriptures in the original. He felt that all he needed now was the Guru's grace. He also said that he had read I Am That, and was so deeply impressed with it that he had selected Maharaj as his final Guru, and would not leave Bombay without receiving his grace. Also, there was a time limit within which Maharaj must bestow that grace because his leave would expire on a particular date, and he had already booked his return ticket for Calcutta on a certain day. By now, Maharaj could not restrain a very broad smile. Maharaj, I would like to ask you something.
Visitor. Yes, sir. He pushed out his chest and spoke with the confidence of a well-prepared candidate appearing for a viva voce examination.
Maharaj, you have read many books and met many gurus, so you must have by now found your own true identity. Tell me, what is your true identity as far as you yourself are concerned?
Visitor. Sir, I am a humble seeker seeking enlightenment and have come to you with the confident hope that you will not refuse me your grace.
Maharaj, you still have quite a few days here, so there is plenty of time for grace or enlightenment. Let us first find out who it is that wants enlightenment. Indeed, let us find out whether there is any need at all for enlightenment or freedom, or moksha, or whatever. Now let me have your answer to my question. Have you come to know your own true identity? Forget for the moment the world and the guru and God.
Visitor: This is a very awkward question, sir. All I want is the grace of the guru, without which the door will not open to me.
Maharaj, but should we not find out first whether there is at all a closed door barring your entry? Entry into what? You keep talking of the guru. What is your idea of a guru? You see, unless these basic questions are first answered to your own satisfaction, how can we proceed? Therefore, I repeat, after so many years of study, have you been able to find out your true identity? This you who is seeking the guru's grace in order to attain enlightenment?
Visitor: Sir, I am sorry to say that you're making me very confused. All I can say in answer to your question is, I don't know.
Maharaj, now we are getting somewhere. I don't know. No one has ever spoken words truer than these. Indeed, that is the only truth, and everything else is false.
Visitor: Sir, I would have thought that you were making fun of me, but the look on your face suggests that you could hardly be more serious.
Maharaj, now, please try to understand. You have done quite a bit of reading, and you should be able to apprehend what I am saying. Try, and for a moment, forget all that you have accumulated by way of knowledge, and grasp with an empty mind what I tell you. Remember, an empty mind, empty but keen, not just void and inert. Before the I-amness, when we did not know ourselves, what was that state? In that state, we did not even know our own existence. Then, spontaneously, came the message or thought, the knowledge I am. This knowledge I am started the sense of duality, subject and object, sin and merit, and the entire gamut of interrelated opposites. Whatever was before the knowledge I am is truth. Whatever is subsequent to the knowledge of I am is false. Understand this basic fact. I amness, the sense of presence, has been given various laudatory names like Prakriti, Ishwara, etc. But nevertheless, it is an illusion, pure ignorance. It is Prakriti that, with the cooperation of conceptual Purusha, both constituting the parenthood principle, creates the world and peoples it with innumerable physical forms. It is Prakriti in action that makes consciousness, which gives sentience to the sentient being, mistakenly believe that it is the particular form itself. Consciousness thus assumes the identity of the particular form and forgets its true nature. Are you with me so far? Any questions?
Visitor: Sir, I am following you single-mindedly. No questions.
Maharaj, good. So far in this process, you will have noticed, there is no question of an entity with independent existence. You are that which is prior to the arrival of I-amness. What has come upon your true nature is like an illness or an eclipse for a certain duration, at the end of which the physical form will die and will be buried or cremated, and will thereafter mingle with the 5 elements of which it was made. The life force of breath will disappear and mingle with the air outside the body. Consciousness will be freed of the limitation of the body and the 3 gunas. In other words, the process will have reached its allotted end. Now, let me come back to your problem. Who is it that needs the Guru's grace in order to attain liberation? And liberation from which bondage?
Visitor: Maharaj, you have turned the problem around 180 degrees. You have reduced all my labor of 40 years to zero, and you have nullified my very existence. You have liquidated me. What can I say? The only thing is that in liquidating me, you have also liquidated the Guru.
Maharaj, not quite, although that is not a bad reaction. Now listen further. The trouble is that you look upon yourself as an individual entity with a physical form, and you also look upon the Guru as another individual entity with another form, albeit with something in his head or heart or somewhere which makes him an enlightened person, but nevertheless a person, all the same. This is the real mistake. The Guru, however, has realized that he is the ultimate reality. He sees every being as he sees himself, i.e., not as a person, nor as a mere form or thing. The other mistake is that the seeker, the disciple, as an entity, expects to learn and understand something. But how can a mere conceptual object understand anything? What actually happens is that the understanding, as such, makes the seeker, the sadhaka, disappear. The individuality of the seeker gradually disappears, but, in the process, the Guru's grace, which is always present like the shining sun, becomes one with consciousness. The sooner the identification with the body as a separate entity is lost, the sooner will the grace bloom in the consciousness of the disciple. And then he will realize that the Guru is none other than the consciousness within, and it is consciousness which, pleased with the faith and love of the disciple, will act as the Sadguru and unfold all the knowledge that is necessary. However, there cannot be any progress, though progress itself is an erroneous concept, if you continue to regard yourself as an entity and expect the Guru, as another entity, to give you some homework to do, and when that is duly completed, to award you a sort of certificate, or something, on a platter as liberation. This whole concept is misconceived. You must realize the true significance of the Guru and his grace before the ever-present Guru's grace can smoothly and naturally flow towards you. The visitor sat dumbfounded for a few moments. When he could find words, he said,
Sir, you have opened my eyes and made me see the falsity and futility of what I considered to be knowledge and understanding. I have no words to express my gratefulness to you.
He prostrated before Maharaj and left, a humbler and wiser man, the seed of consciousness. He looked fidgety and agitated. His movements were jerky, and he was obviously bursting with impatience. This was a middle-aged European, slim and physically very fit. It was his first visit to Maharaj. His restlessness drew everybody's attention to him. As Maharaj looked at him, tears suddenly welled up in his eyes. A compassionate glance from Maharaj seemed to compose him a little, and he gave the usual preliminary information about himself in a few words. He said he had been a student of Vedanta for at least 20 years, but his search for truth had proved abortive. He was deeply despondent and disillusioned, and could not continue the frustrating pursuit any longer. A flash of hope had come to him when he read Maharaj's book, I Am That, and he knew that he had found the answer. Immediately, he had gathered the minimum amount of cash needed for the journey to India and had just arrived in Bombay. In a choked voice, he said, I have now arrived. My search is over. Tears were flowing freely from his eyes, and he could hardly control himself. Maharaj listened to him gravely and sat still for a few minutes with his eyes closed, perhaps to give him time to compose himself. Then he asked him whether he was firmly convinced that he was not the body. The visitor confirmed that it was quite clear to him that he was not merely the body, but something other than the body, and, as was clearly explained in the book, that something must be the knowledge I am, the sense of being. But, he added, he could not understand what was meant by the suggestion that he should remain continuously with this knowledge, I am. What exactly was he supposed to do? "Please, sir," he told Maharaj, "I am now unbearably tired of words. I have read and heard them in millions and have not gained anything. Give me the substance now, not mere words. I shall be eternally grateful to you." "Very well," said Maharaj, "you will have the substance now. Of course, I will have to use words to convey it to you." Maharaj then proceeded, "If I say, 'reverse,' and go back to the source of your beingness, will it make any sense to you?" In reply, the visitor said that his heart intuitively accepted the truth of Maharaj's statement, but he would have to go deeper into the matter. Maharaj then told him that he must understand the position clearly and instantly. This he could do only if he went to the root of the matter. He must find out how the knowledge I am first appeared. "The seed is the thing," said Maharaj. "Find out the seed of this beingness, and you will know the seed of the entire universe." Maharaj went on, "As you know, you have the body, and in the body is the prana, or the life force, and consciousness, or the beingness, or the knowledge I am. Now, this total phenomenon of the human being, is it any different from that of the other creatures? Or even the grass which sprouts up from the earth? Think over it deeply. Suppose a little water accumulates in your backyard. After a time, the body of an insect forms itself there. It begins to move, and it knows that it exists. Then again, suppose a piece of stale bread is left in a corner for some days. A worm makes its appearance in it and begins to move, and it knows that it exists. The egg of a fowl, after being hatched for a certain length of time, suddenly breaks open and a little chick appears. It begins to move about, and it knows that it exists. The sperm of man, germinated in the womb of woman after the 9-month period, is delivered as a baby. The sperm, developed into the form of a full-grown infant, goes through the states of sleeping and waking, carries out its usual physical functions, and knows that it exists. In all these cases, the insect, the worm, the chicken, and the human being, what is it that is really born? What is it that has supervised the process from conception to delivery? Is it not the knowledge I am that has remained latent from conception to delivery, and in due course is born? This beingness or consciousness, identical in all the 4 cases, finding itself without any kind of support, mistakenly identifies itself with the particular form it has assumed. In other words, what is really without any shape or form? The knowledge I am, just the sense of beingness, not being this or being that, but consciousness generally, limits itself to only one particular form, and thereby accepts its own birth, and thereafter the constant shadow of the terror of death. Thus is born the notion of an individual personality, or identity, or ego. Now, do you see the source of I amness? Is it not dependent on the body for its individual existence? And is not the body merely the germinated sperm which has developed itself? And, importantly, is the sperm anything other than the essence of the food consumed by the father of the child? And, finally, is not the food something thrown up by the 4 elements, ether, air, fire, and water, through the medium of the 5th element, the earth? The seed of consciousness is thus traced to nothing but food, and the body is the food of consciousness. As soon as the body dies, consciousness also disappears. And yet, consciousness is the seed of the entire universe. Every single individual, whenever he dreams, has an identical experience of a world being created in consciousness. When a person is not quite awake and consciousness is just stirring, he dreams. And in his dream, in that minimal spot of consciousness, is created an entire dream world, similar to the real world outside, all in a split second. And in that world are seen the sun, the earth, with hills and rivers, buildings and people, including the dreamer himself, behaving exactly like the people in the real world. Whilst the dream lasts, the dream world is very real indeed, and the experiences of the people in the dream, including the dreamer himself, appear to be true, tangible, and authentic. Perhaps even more so than those of the real world. But once the dreamer wakes up, the entire dream world with all its realities that then existed collapses into the consciousness in which it was created. In the waking state, the world emerges because of the seed of ignorance, consciousness, beingness, prakriti, ishvara, etc., and takes you into a waking dream state. Both sleep and waking are conceptual states in the living dream. Those who dream that they are awake dream that they are asleep and do not realize that they are dreaming because they are still in the dream. Indeed, when you do realize that this is all a dream, you will have already awakened. Only the Jnani knows true waking and true sleep. At this stage, when the visitor was asked by Maharaj if he had any questions on what he had heard so far, he promptly asked, "What is the principle or the conceptual mechanism behind the creation of the world?" Maharaj was pleased that the visitor had correctly used the words conceptual mechanism, because he often reminds us that the entire creation of the world is conceptual, and that it is most important to remember this fact and not to forget it in the midst of all the profusion of words and concepts. Maharaj then continued, "The original state, the Parabrahman, is unconditioned, without attributes, without form, without identity. Indeed, that state is nothing but fullness, not an empty void, but plenum, so that it is impossible to give it any adequate name. For the sake of communication, however, a number of words have been used to indicate that state. In that original state, prior to any concept, consciousness, the thought, 'I am,' spontaneously stirs into existence. How? Why? For no apparent reason, like a gentle wave on an expanse of water. The thought, 'I am,' is the seed of the sound Aum, the primordial sound or nada at the start of the creation of the universe. It consists of three sounds, A, U, and M. These three sounds represent the three attributes, sattva, rajas, and tamas, which have produced the three states of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, also named consciousness or harmony, activity, and rest. It is in consciousness that the world has emerged. Indeed, the very first thought, 'I am,' has created the sense of duality in the original state of unicity. No creation can take place without the duality of the parenthood principle, male and female, Purusha and Prakriti. Creation of the world, as an appearance in consciousness, has a tenfold aspect. The parent principle of duality, the physical and chemical material being the essence of the five elements, ether, air, fire, water, and earth, under mutual friction, and the three attributes of sattva, rajas, and tamas. An individual may think that it is he who acts, but it is truly the essence of the five elements, the prana, the life force, which acts through the particular combination of the three attributes in a particular physical form. When creation of the world is viewed in this perspective, it is easy to understand why the thoughts and actions of one individual, which is actually nothing but a psychosomatic apparatus, differ so much in quality and degree from those of the millions of others. Why there are Mahatma Gandhis at one end and Hitlers at the other. It is a well-established fact that fingerprints of one person are never exactly similar to those of any other person. Leaves of the same tree are found different from one another in minute details. The reason is that the permutations and combinations of the 5 elements, plus the 3 attributes in their millions of shades, would go into billions and trillions. Let us by all means admire what we think is admirable and love what we think is lovable, but let us understand what it is that we really love and admire. Not the conceptual individual, but the wonderful acting ability of consciousness, which is able to play simultaneously millions of roles in this dream play that the world is. To avoid being lost in the bewildering diversity of the play of Maya, Lila, said Maharaj, it is necessary at this stage not to forget the essential unity between the absolute and the relative, between the non-manifest and the manifestation. The manifestation comes into existence only with the basic concept, I am. The substratum is the noumenon, which is total potentiality. With the arising of I amness, it mirrors itself into the phenomenal universe, which only appears to be exterior to the noumenon. In order to see itself, noumenon objectifies itself into phenomenon, and for this objectivization to take place, space and time are the necessary concepts, in which the phenomena are extended in volume and duration. Phenomenon, therefore, is not something different from noumenon, but it is noumenon itself when objectivized. It is necessary to understand and never to forget this essential identity. Once the concept I am arises, the fundamental unity gets notionally separated as subject and object in duality. When impersonal consciousness manifests itself and identifies itself with each physical form, the I notion arises, and this I notion, forgetting that it has no independent entity, converts its original subjectivity into an object with intentions, wants, and desires, and is, therefore, vulnerable to suffering. This mistaken identity is precisely the bondage from which liberation is to be sought. And what is liberation? Liberation, enlightenment, or awakening is nothing other than understanding profoundly, apperceiving, A, that the seed of all manifestation is the impersonal consciousness, B, that what is being sought is the unmanifested aspect of manifestation, and C, that, therefore, the seeker himself is the sought. Summarizing the discourse, Maharaj said, "Let us get it all together again. In the original state prevails, I am, without any knowledge or conditioning, without attributes, without form or identity. Then, for no apparent reason, other than that it is its nature to do so, arises the thought or concept, I am, the impersonal consciousness on which the world appears as a living dream. Consciousness, in order to manifest itself, needs a form, a physical body, with which it identifies itself and thus starts the concept of bondage, with an imaginary objectivization of I. Whenever one thinks and acts from the standpoint of this self-identification, one could be said to have committed the original sin of turning pure subjectivity, the potential, into an object, a limited actuality. No object has an independent existence of its own, and, therefore, an object cannot awaken itself from the living dream. Yet, and this is the joke, the phantom individual, an object, seeks some other object, as the absolute or reality or whatever. If this is clear, one must reverse and go back to find out what one originally was, and always has been, before consciousness arose. At this stage comes the awakening that one is neither the body nor even the consciousness, but the unnameable state of total potentiality prior to the arrival of consciousness. In consciousness, that state, with whatever name, can only be a concept. And so the circle is complete. The seeker is the... In conclusion, said Maharaj, understand profoundly that as I, one is noumenal. The current condition of phenomenality the seed of which is consciousness, is a temporary one, like a disease or an eclipse on one's original changeless condition of noumenality, and all that one can do is to go through one's allotted span of living, at the end of which the eclipse of phenomenality is over, and noumenality prevails again in its pure unity, totally unaware of its awareness. Through all this exposition, the visitor sat still, as if under a spell. He made an unsuccessful effort or two to talk, but Maharaj quickly stopped him with a firm gesture, and he sat there in perfect peace until after other visitors had paid their respects to Maharaj and left, one by one. Self-realization is effortless. It is the practice of Maharaj to expound a particular point in depth with great patience, giving apt examples and similes. After that, when he asks for questions on what has been said, the queries often tend to be based not on the point which he has been at such pains to expound, but on the examples which he had given merely to illustrate a particular aspect of the subject under discussion. Such questions clearly show that the questioners have missed the main point altogether. Maharaj, therefore, often exhorts the visitors. You may ask questions on what has been said, but do so without identifying yourself with the body. Many visitors feel uneasy when the invitation to ask questions is thus made subject to a condition which appears to them rather onerous, even unfair. Why does he insist that the questioner should disidentify himself from the body? The direct answer would be, because an object cannot presume to understand its subject. It is impossible for a shadow to understand the substance of which it is a shadow. So long as there is a conceptual individual identifying himself with the body, which is merely a psychosomatic apparatus, an object, as an autonomous entity, can it be possible for him to understand anything at all about the Absolute, which is totally untouched by the objective? And further, can any queries from someone thinking and speaking as a supposedly autonomous entity be anything but arrant absurdity? It, however, does not imply that questions could arise only from a fully realized being. A realized being, a jnani, would have no questions at all. What Maharaj would seem to expect of his listeners is something midway between these two extremes. As he often says, he assumes that those who come to him would not be just tyros, but will have already done a fair amount of homework on the subject, not mumukshus, but sadhakas. In other words, Maharaj wants the listener not to forget that he is the impersonal consciousness, and not the physical apparatus in which consciousness has manifested itself. He expects that listening to him should be on the basis of apperceiving, without any intervention of the conceptual individual, and with a clear understanding of what is functioning during the process of talking and listening. In this context, Maharaj says, "In order to be effective, the receptivity for my words must be such that they penetrate like an arrow. I speak to consciousness, and not to any object." Maharaj's advice to listeners is to apperceive directly and forget immediately, not to use his words as a platform from which to launch their own concepts. Concepts, he says, arise from thoughts, and all these together form a bundle that is known as mind. Thinking means conceptualizing, creating objects in mind, and this is bondage. Words, basically dualistic and conceptual, are an obstruction to enlightenment. They can only serve the temporary purpose of communication, but thereafter they are a bondage. Getting rid of conceptual thinking means enlightenment, awakening, which cannot be otherwise attained or obtained by anyone. Enlightenment is not a thing to be acquired by anyone, at any time, at any place. Penetration of Maharaj's words like an arrow brings about this apperception, and that is enlightenment. To this, the visitor's spontaneous reaction is, if there is no one to acquire anything, what are we expected to do? Maharaj's equally quick counter-question is, Who is we? The answer usually comes, if it comes, tardily, hesitantly. You mean we itself is part of the conceptual thinking? Totally illusory? At this stage, Maharaj repeats what he has always been saying. All knowledge is conceptual, therefore apperceive directly and give up the search for knowledge. But how many of you will do so? How many of you understand what I am trying to convey to you? What is the purpose of all my talks? Asks Maharaj. It is to make you understand, to see, to apperceive your true nature. But first, there is a hindrance to be removed. Or rather, a hindrance that must disappear before you can see and be the what is. All thinking, conceptualizing, objectivizing must cease. Why? Because what is does not have the slightest touch of objectivity. It is the subject of all objects, and not being an object, it cannot be observed. The eye sees everything else, but cannot see itself. To the question, what does one have to do? What efforts must one make to stop conceptualizing? Maharaj's answer is, nothing, no efforts. Who is to make the effort? What effort did you make to grow from a tiny sperm cell to a full-grown baby in your mother's womb? And thereafter, for several months when you grew from the helpless baby to an infant, what efforts did you make to sense your presence? And now you talk of efforts, which you must make. What efforts can an illusory, conceptual eye make to know its true nature? What efforts can a shadow make to know its substance? Realizing one's true nature requires no phenomenal effort. Enlightenment cannot be attained nor forced. It can only happen when it is given the opportunity to do so, when obstruction by concepts ceases. It can appear only when it is given a vacant space to appear in. If someone else is to occupy this house, says Maharaj, I must first vacate it. If the conceptual I is already in occupation, how can enlightenment enter? Let the conceptual I vacate and give enlightenment a chance to enter. Even making a positive effort to stop thinking as a method of getting rid of conceptualizing is an exercise in futility, and so is any other kind of effort. The only effective effort is instant apperceiving of truth. See false as false, and what remains is the truth. What is absent now will appear when what is now present disappears. It is as simple as that. Negation is the only answer.